This is Greg Corombos of Radio America reporting for WorldNet Daily. I'm pleased to be joined in studio today by Tim Donner. For the past 25 years, he's run his own small business here in Northern Virginia, Horizons Television. However, he's giving a little bit of a break from that as he runs for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate here in the Old Dominion in the 2012 race. It's an open seat, having been vacated by one-term Democrat Jim Webb. And Tim, it's great to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Greg.
Tim, as I just mentioned, longtime small business owner and a successful one. Why are you putting that on the back burner at least a little bit in order to launch this campaign and begin a public service career?
Well, mine's going to be a very different kind of candidacy, Greg. I've been involved in public policy for many years, but as you say, I am a small businessman and an entrepreneur and a broadcast journalist. I lived in Virginia for 25 years. I'm running because I have grave concerns about our future. I believe I'm convinced we're at a tipping point with the outrageously reckless and irresponsible spending of our hard-earned money by the professional ruling class politicians. They have us at the edge of the cliff. And I am running because we need someone who's going to stand up, unafraid, upright, tell the truth, and stand for the bold and dramatic reforms that are no longer optional, but vital.
Tim, let me get your reaction to a couple of the economic debates that have already happened, are ongoing, and are about to come. First of all, the continuing resolution. We nearly had a government shutdown. Republicans in the House initially wanted $100 billion in cuts. The most they could actually pass was $61 billion. That got defeated in the Senate, compromised at $38.5 billion. The Congressional Budget Office says it may have been less than $500 million in the end in terms of savings for this actual fiscal year. As you watched all that play out, how would you have handled that as a member of the Senate?
Well, you know, that was very instructive, Greg, as to how the government has worked. And, you know, this is what I would call the usual Capitol Hill kabuki dance, where there's all this partisan posturing, this doublespeak, and these accounting tricks. They told us $38 billion in cuts and almost shut down the government over it. Then, when the Congressional Budget Office finally got a hold of the numbers, they told us it was $355 million. So we almost shut down the government over essentially nothing. You know, people are sick and tired of this kind of activity that they've seen endlessly on Capitol Hill. The biggest problem with that whole debacle was that we dealt with just a sliver of the budget, just 12%, with $14 trillion in national debt, with a $1.6 trillion deficit for this year alone. We can't just attack 12% of the budget that we call non-defense, domestic, discretionary spending. We've got to attack 100% of the budget. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to attack the mandatory payments.
Well, let's talk about the debt ceiling vote. Now, that could be coming up in a couple of weeks or a few weeks, depending on how Congress exactly calculates when we reach that debt limit. The president wants a clean extension of the debt ceiling. It sounds like Republicans are not going to give that to him. Some ideas floating out there have been a balanced budget amendment, an idea of capping spending at a specific percentage of GDP. Are you among those who would want major concessions for raising of the debt ceiling, or do you believe that's completely unnecessary in terms of raising the debt ceiling at all?
Well, of course, the president is now telling us that it's vital to raise the debt ceiling when he voted against doing the same thing when he was in his very short tenure in the Senate. We absolutely have to tie this raising of the debt ceiling to serious budget reform. We don't get that many opportunities to say, here is a moment of truth. Here is an opportunity for us to use the opportunity that arises out of crisis to make the kind of reforms that are vital. Now, the Gang of Six that consists of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the Senate may hold sway in this because there's a bipartisan group working together for serious reform, dealing with 100% of the budget. But I'm not one of these chicken little people that feels the sky's going to fall if we don't automatically raise the debt ceiling, because we have over $2 trillion in tax revenues this year alone. Of course, the problem is we spend, as the federal government spends, $3.8 trillion. But just by refusing to raise the debt ceiling alone, we can force them to reprioritize the revenues that they do have and help to, for example, get rid of a lot of the duplication of services in the federal government. When we saw the recent Government Accountability Office report that said that there's between $100 and $200 billion that are wasted in programs that are duplicated by several different agencies of the federal government.
The big debate coming down the pike following the debt ceiling debate, of course, will be about the budget for fiscal year 2012. And then you have the Paul Ryan plan, which obviously calls for major reforms to Medicare. It calls for slashing spending from the president's budget by about $6 trillion over 10 years. Existing levels, I think it's $4+ trillion. The president had a counter speech where he basically talked about the need to cut defense spending and raise taxes on the rich, talked about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse from Medicare and some of the other entitlements and so forth. Your response to those competing plans and where you think you'd line up there?
Well, waste, fraud, and abuse is the last refuge of every desperate politician. We've been hearing that for as long as you and me have been alive, Greg, and we can't change things simply by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, or it wouldn't have endured as long as it has. The two plans that are competing, the Obama plan's entirely predictable. The plan goes back to when he put together a debt commission, trumpeted it, and then refused to accept a single one of their recommendations. It goes back to when he put together his budget for this year and in a cowardly way refused to even challenge the Republicans to get together and talk about entitlement program reform. Instead, he waited for the Republicans to go first so that he could take what they said, distort it, demagogue the issue, and play the usual divide between the wealthy and the rest of us. And what he did was, as a writer in the Wall Street Journal, Daniel Henninger, has written, he's conducting his continuing jihad against billionaires and millionaires in this country, and saying that we can balance the budget on their backs. We cannot tax our way to prosperity. We cannot spend our way to prosperity. We can only grow our way to prosperity. The Ryan plan is a good start. I don't think it's the entire answer, and there's some things about it, some fundamental things that I disagree with, but it's an awful lot better than what we have now, because we have a crisis in confidence among people 40 years old and younger in our entitlement programs. How can we, with a straight face, continue to confiscate their money for a program that they know when it comes time to take out what they've put in, there's not going to be anything there?
We'll talk about the dynamics of your primary campaign in just a moment, but obviously something else the Senate will have to deal with are foreign policy issues. A lot of foreign policy issues coming up in the Senate. Your opponents may claim that you have a great deal of experience in the small business sector, but maybe not on the international stage. What will you be relying on to guide you there?
Well, I mean, what we need for foreign policy is common sense, knowledge, and judgment, just like we do in the other realms of the political world. Common sense tells us that we need to apply the test of America's foreign interest to any potential, America's national interest, to any potential foreign involvement. You take the case of Libya, and where's our national interest there? We don't get any oil from them. Europeans do. Let them lead the effort, but then we're going to follow their lead? And what about the rebel force that we're backing with our own military power? Do we really even know anything about them? Do we know enough to dedicate our talent and our treasure to support this rebel force that includes al-Qaeda fighters, among others? In terms of foreign policy, it takes common sense, and it takes judgment, and it takes knowledge. And I think we've seen what the results of the professional ruling class politicians have been over the years, and that applies to foreign policy as well as it does to domestic policy.
In terms of domestic policy in the primary, social issues could become a major issue. The issue of abortion, the issue of the definition of marriage. Virginia, of course, has an amendment defining marriage in the state as one man and one woman. But when you look at the pro-life versus pro-choice question and the marriage debate in Virginia, where will you be standing on those issues?
Well, I am 100% pro-life. I consider myself a very committed social conservative. I think it's very simple. If we can't guarantee all of our people from the womb to the elderly the first guarantee of the Declaration of Independence, which is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and all the other guarantees mean absolutely nothing. So I will stand boldly and unapologetically for life. And life in all of its forms, and that means not just for the unborn, but for the least among us, for the elderly, for the disabled, for the sick. A society that's great must also be good.
Tim, as you know, it could potentially be a crowded Republican field for this nomination. There's still over a year to go, so a lot of things could change in the dynamics of the race. The man who formerly held this seat, former governor, former Senator George Allen, is already in this race, so he's considered the odds-on favorite. As you look at his time from 2001 to 2007 in the Senate, what convinced you that he was not good enough to be the Republican standard bearer and that you had to get in this race and challenge him?
Well, let me answer the first part of your question first, which is that I think it's a great thing that the people of Virginia will be given, a full range of choices in this Republican primary. And this is very common when there is no incumbent. And so let 100 flowers bloom. In terms of George Allen, well, I look at his record in the Senate, and after being a rather conservative governor, when he was in the Senate, he voted for the largest expansion of federal power in health care, Medicare prescription drug program. He voted for the largest expansion of federal power in education, with No Child Left Behind. And I don't think that means so much that he's not conservative, so much as that when he went to Washington, he became a part of the ruling class, a part of the oligarchy. And I'm not interested in going to Washington to feather my own nest, or for power, or to be something. I want to go there to do something. I have a serious agenda, and I would not leave the very good life that I've been blessed with in order to just work around the edges. I'm interested in bold, serious, dramatic reform, and what I'm going to challenge the voters of Virginia with is this question: which of the candidates has the vision, a positive vision for the future, the independence from the political establishment, and the stature to stand up, tell the truth, and stand for the bold reforms that are vital for such a time as this?
In contrast to the crowded Republican field, it looks like former Governor Tim Kaine has got the Democratic nomination all to himself. Probably a little bit easier even to contrast yourself with him. What do you look at his record, his time as Governor of Virginia or head of the DNC, that gives you an indication of where your strongest contrast would be with him?
Well, Governor Kaine is someone who, as chairman of the Democratic National Committee, has been a cheerleader for every item on the Obama agenda since the president took office. So if you like Obamacare, vote for Tim Kaine. If you like the failed stimulus programs, vote for Tim Kaine. If you like the bailouts, vote for Tim Kaine. If you like the dramatic expansion of power by the federal government, vote for Tim Kaine. I think it's very easy to describe and to define Tim Kaine as a politician circa 2011, 2012. If you like Barack Obama, you'll love Tim Kaine.
Last question before we let you go. Where can folks learn more about your campaign and perhaps contribute if they wish?
DonnerForSenate.com. DonnerForSenate.com. And our website is up and running. We've got information about myself, our issues, who I am, what I stand for, what I'll do as Senator from Virginia. DonnerForSenate.com.
Tim, an exciting time. I know the journey's just begun. Good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you, Greg. Pleasure.
Been joined here by Tim Donner, longtime small business owner of Horizons Televisions in Great Falls, Virginia, and he's now a candidate for the Republican nomination for the U.S. Senate in the state of Virginia. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America, reporting for WorldNet Daily.